Okay, let's dive right into this. For years, casual observers have looked at 905 Wood and just assumed, oh, they're a traditional physical wood hauling business that suddenly decided to pivot to tech. But actually, scratch that. If you take a deep dive into the company's internal core intelligence engine corpus, you find something absolutely explosive. Right there in the foundational paperwork, the corporate identity is explicitly defined as, and I quote, the commercial data monetization and SaaS revenue arm. They didn't pivot to data. They were literally chartered as a data business from day one. Welcome to this deep dive explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to guide you through this today because, frankly, we're going to completely reframe how we understand enterprise value. If you're fascinated by the economics of the circular bioeconomy, or if you just love seeing a legacy physical industry turned completely upside down by clever corporate structuring, where a literal dumpster becomes a sentient bridge to the biocarbon market, you are definitely in the right place.
Here's exactly how we'll break this all down today. First up, we'll look at the true corporate charter, then the SaaS product catalog, followed by the multi-buyer data market. After that, we'll compare wood hauling versus SaaS economics, check out the Sentient Edge machine, and finally wrap up with owning the ledger of trust. Let's get to it.
Starting off with Section 1, the true corporate charter. So this is where the whole illusion of the traditional wood hauling company just kind of falls apart. Looking at the legal documentation, you see it clearly splits the company's identity into two totally distinct entities. Item 1, 95wood.com Corporation, is strictly the physical operations side. We're talking the physical trucks and the bins. But Item 2, 95wood.com Sales, has an entirely separate business identification number dedicated solely to data, sauce, API, and carbon revenue. What does this mean? It means the physical truck and the dumpster are, well, nothing more than a chaotic physical customer acquisition channel for a highly lucrative digital ledger. Moving right along to Section 2, the SaaS product catalog. So if the truck is just the acquisition channel, what exactly is the actual product? Well, just take a look at these 6 digital SKUs. Notice something? Not a single one of these is a truck rental. No way. This is a pure software and data monetization catalog. We're talking recurring royalties on carbon removal certificates, Forest Edge Scope 3 ESG APIs for developers, zero levy report cards, decoupled billing audit invoices, certificates of origin, and B2B general contractor data feeds. These are high-margin software line items, plain and simple. To actually produce those software SKUs, the 95wood Digital Refinery application relies on a pretty strict workflow. It starts simply enough with a request for quote, or RFQ. Then it pushes that data through a rigorous compliance gate assessment, verifies the certificate of origin, and ultimately outputs a clean, compliance-ready PDF documentation package straight through their UI/UX. Step by step, it's like a refinery taking chaotic construction waste and turning it into a high-purity, sellable digital product that's ready for the incredibly strict biocarbon markets. That brings us to Section 3, a multi-buyer data market.
Now, what's really interesting about this is that this isn't just some gimmick or a nice-to-have feature. The verified data has multiple independent buyers who absolutely cannot fake the provenance ledger. Biochar producers, they need the data to mint carbon credits on the Puro.Earth biocarbon market. Large corporations and developers, they need the Scope 3 API for their ESG obligations. And auditors, insurers, and cross-border shippers rely on those exact same compliance PDFs. When you have multiple, totally independent industries requiring the exact same digital record, well, that right there is a robust, thriving data market. To put a very specific price tag on this, just look at this number, $2,674. That is the exact reconciled value of a single mothership CORC, or CO2 removal certificate. When the data is verified to meet the high purity requirements of the biocarbon market, that is the massive financial stake unlocked for biochar producers. The data is literally what validates that entire value.
But on the flip side of that massive carbon reward is a pretty terrifying risk. In Ontario, an OREG 347 environmental liability fine can range anywhere from $25,000 up to $100,000 per violation just for a single misclassification. So insurers are incredibly motivated buyers of this audit-proof data because it allows them to confidently price down their transportation risk. If the chain of custody is indisputable, the liability risk just plummets. All right, let's get into Section 4, wood hauling versus SaaS economics. To really grasp this, we first have to look at the macroeconomic context, especially considering the year-to-date headline news trends. We've seen a lot of noise out of Washington lately. Discussions involving Donald Trump, USMC, or CUSMA as it's known of in Canada, and of course tariffs. This has brought cross-border trade into sharp focus for leaders like Ontario's Doug Ford. But what's really fascinating is how all this impacts municipal solid waste, or MSW, disposal. The Ontario-Michigan Waste Corridor is absolutely massive. Get this. Michigan imports 3.46 million tons of trash from Ontario every single year. That represents over 14% of all waste disposed of in Michigan landfills. We are talking about a colossal physical supply chain shipped right across the border. So the crucial question is, how do you actually monetize that corridor? If you're a traditional hauling company, your economics look like item one. It's one-time revenue, it's capital heavy with all those physical trucks, and your razor-thin margins are constantly squeezed by things like Section 232 tariffs and Michigan landfill fee hikes, which, by the way, leaped from 36 cents up to $5 a ton. Ouch. But 905 Wood? They're playing a totally different game in item two. Data and SaaS economics mean recurring software margins, near zero marginal cost per digital record, and massive network effects where the ledger actually appreciates in value as we get closer to the 2036 Circle regulatory ceilings. A hauling company is valued on physical trucks, a SaaS company is valued on recurring digital revenue multiples. Huge difference. Which leads us perfectly into Section 5, the Sentient Edge Machine. This technology is essentially the sentient bridge between chaotic construction waste and high-purity data. And being completely roadmap honest about the tech stack here, today's fleet utilizes the Pixel 10 Pro processing via Gemma 4, Claude Opus 4.8, and GPT OSS 120B. But looking at the near term, they are fully operationalizing the Google Pixel 11 Pro featuring the Tensor G6 chip, Android 17, and Gemini 3.6 Pro. This rapid hardware evolution is exactly what allows them to process digital measurement, reporting, and verification, or DMRV, in under 500 milliseconds. And the real secret sauce making that lightning-fast, sub-500 millisecond speed possible? It's TurboQuant and the Light RT AI stack. This advanced compression essentially means that heavy, incredibly smart foundational AI models don't have to sit around waiting for a spotty cloud connection. They operate natively, right on the mobile edge, directly at the physical dumpster site. Let's move to the next step and see how this builds into a truly audit-proof system. First, the edge model mints the DMRV object right at the bin. Now, if there's a complex visual edge case, it gets instantly routed to a cloud-based model council. This council then works to achieve a multi-model consensus, which they refer to as explainable compliance. Finally, that verified data updates an immutable provenance ledger for the buyer. The beauty here is that auditors don't have to just blindly trust a single AI's guess. They're trusting a verified multi-model consensus. And finally, Section 6, owning the ledger of trust. We really need to completely internalize this paradigm shift. By operationalizing this Google Pixel 11 Pro and Light AI stack, 905 Wood's value shifts entirely to the DMRV and provenance data cut. They do not sell wood disposal. The Sentient Bridge is a SaaS application service whose customer acquisition channel just happens to be a dumpster. I'll say it again. The data, not just the wood, is the actual product. The real-world impacts of this SaaS application service are just massive. First, it completely eliminates that uninsurable visual fallacy liability of misclassifying waste. Furthermore, by owning the provenance ledger for this entire cross-border waste corridor, they effectively control the pricing of trust in the circular bioeconomy. Ultimately, owning this impenetrable ledger is exactly what secures Ontario's industrial leadership in the Canadian and global biocarbon markets. Which leaves us with this final, somewhat provocative thought. If the true high multiple enterprise value of a dirty legacy physical waste corridor is actually found in its digital compliance ledger, well, what other legacy physical industries are just waiting out there right now to be completely flipped into a high margin SaaS model? It's definitely something to chew on. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking those big questions, and I'll see you next time.